In year 44 of the Second Epoch, Madara floods the Oaklash frontline with level 125 soul-binding gargoyles, turning the sky into hostile airspace, while a level 150 permafrost skeletal dragon joins them, basically Viserion after a brutally efficient necromancer respec, and dives toward the defenders below. The God Guild holds its defense line anyway, though nobody appreciates Madara deploying a raid boss large enough to invalidate reasonable battlefield planning, so a holy caster raises the light-forged holy Aegis while a hooded mage bends void attraction, stacking protection and crowd control together. And a masked fighter warns that Madara's liches belong to him, making this apocalypse sound disturbingly like a territorial loot dispute. Su answers with a charge for Awin, leading the soldiers straight into the undead formation before fear can root them in place, where one radiant sword sweep takes a skeleton apart, and announces that the Vice Guild leader brought considerably better damage numbers today. Then the golden arcs continue through the formation, scattering bones, armor, and weapons while clearing a path across the battered front line, and his troops erupt in praise, recalling that Madara's liches destroyed their vice leader's beginner village, somewhere within the kingdom of Aoin. That history gives the counterattack teeth, but the Lich commander still advances beneath swarming gargoyles and spectral beasts, supported by fresh skeleton ranks, before raising a skull-topped staff and chanting an unknown spell, because apparently this undead army still had another phase hidden, which prompts the skeletal dragon to gather freezing blue power inside its jaws and unleash a massive breath attack across the battlefield, sending soldiers and casters tumbling through shattered ground as the icy blast detonates, breaking formation and turning confidence into immediate survival. Yet Su recovers fast enough to order the dragon-hunting crossbowman to fire, choosing focused anti-boss damage over another glorious melee charge, and the prepared bolts launch in a concentrated volley, streaking past him with blue energy while the monster remains exposed above, hammering its armored body from several angles and forcing the dragon backward under explosions powerful enough to crack its icy plating. While the soldiers celebrate their vice leader's call, Su uses the opening to launch himself upward inside a spiraling golden slash, meeting the descending monster head-on as it roars through the bolt impacts, with neither side apparently interested in learning self-preservation, until his blade tears across the skeletal dragon at close range and carries him cleanly past its enormous skull and ribbed torso, leaving a jagged mass of dark ice to crash into the battlefield as both armies watch the impact settle the exchange, temporarily. The fallen dragon skids across the ground behind him, and Su lands hard but upright, cursing the reptile back toward hell, while a soldier celebrates the supposedly invincible God Guild and jokes that victory should finally earn their vice leader a promotion. But the ground begins trembling before anyone can update his title, drawing every defender's attention toward an approaching cavalry force, and recognition wipes the smile from Su's face, because whatever is coming definitely does not belong in the victory screen. As Madara's level 140 Black Ash Knights emerge through crimson smoke, charging like the Rohirrim after somebody toggled the entire cavalry to evil, because the Thornflower Fire Guild abandoned its defensive position without warning, leaving his force surrounded and every escape route rapidly closing. So he orders the rear ranks forward and directs everyone toward an opening at 8 o'clock, refusing to let anyone log off early. While one Black Ash Knight slips through the chaos and hurls a heavy spear straight past the retreating soldiers below, the blood-slick weapon crossing the distance too quickly for warning, before driving squarely through Su's chest and stopping him cold, revealing a level 200 Obliteration Knight behind the assault, an enemy deployed when Madara apparently wants victory secured without balancing concerns. And although the dying fighter realizes victory could have triggered the world quest to revive Awoween, he cannot accept this ending, especially when the game interface reports excessive blood loss and critical life, reducing a collapsing kingdom to one merciless red notification. So his armored hand reaches toward the fallen sword, trying to force one last input from a body already failing, but another warning announces cardiopulmonary collapse while he bitterly plans to expose Thornflower Fire's betrayal across the forums after logging out. Only the expected logout never comes, leaving him desperate to escape and urgently start leveling a new alternate character instead, until awareness returns with a skeleton inches from his face, which is one aggressive welcome screen even by Madara's standards, and the black-haired survivor realizes he remains alive rather than forcibly disconnected. Despite knowing liches normally leave nobody still breathing, while the year remains 44 and low-level skeleton fodder surrounds him, making the situation feel strangely outdated and dangerously real, then a green corpse rot wound appears on his abdomen instead of his chest, somehow affecting a body with silver tier resistance. And as he recalls the Holy Church faction's defeat, another problem lands. His entire inventory has vanished with the familiar battlefield. The missing inventory becomes personal when he realizes the undead stripped every item, piece of equipment, and even the courtesy of one bandage. But the location makes even less sense because he should still be at Oaklash unless the game moved him without logging out. raising the ugly possibility of another broken patch as he studies the unfamiliar room and searches for anything resembling an exit, until the building's southern Aeween architecture triggers a worse contradiction. That kingdom supposedly vanished during the Third Black Rose War, and the corpse rot pain feels completely real despite no pain modification, ruling out every convenient explanation involving harmless game settings. So he limps through the corridor seeking a teleportation waypoint, hoping to reclaim his gear and return before the front line collapses, only to find an untouched village outside. And the sign identifies it as Bush rather than any settlement near Oaklash, which he recognizes as an Aeween beginner village, pushing the mystery from weird server behavior into impossible geography and history, because Aeween has already fallen to Madara in his memory. Yet the date reads year 375 of the First Epoch, the year of flowers and summer leaves, when the First Black Rose War was only beginning and Madara's invasion still lay ahead, meaning this is Bucky in the past, while the stranger's memories answer his identity crisis. He is Sufei and also Brendel, a name confirming the body is not his own, and this timeline has pulled a Steins Gate-grade reversal without offering instructions, as Brendel's childhood memories surface, showing his impoverished noble mother from Cardarego leading him past townspeople wary of the family's grandfather, who once fought in the November War, claimed he merely saved 5 comrades, and kept a medal proving that modest battlefield resume, while the young boy vowed to become Oween's greatest swordsman and restore his family glory through practice, ambition, and heroic quantities of confidence. Back in the corridor, a skeleton smashes through the wall, forcing the wounded Brendel to grab a sword and defend his borrowed life. But his first exchange sends steel flying and exposes swordsmanship far weaker than Sufei's battle instincts expected from those childhood dreams. Then the skeleton counters at close range, knocking aside another desperate strike and leaving the shocked fighter without a reliable combat option. So he abandons technique, grabs the undead attacker by the skull, and tries dragging it toward mutual destruction through pure stubbornness, while a memory asks why Sufei always pushed so hard, recalling his vow to avenge the second home Madara's wizards destroyed. The memory continues into the fatal strategy meeting, where Sufei promised victory using 2 battle groups and Thornflower Fire on the right flank, then returns to his impaled last stand when he ordered the guild members to run while their commander stayed behind and bled, forcing the question of which life is truly his, even as both figures stand together inside the same fractured identity, until he accepts the impossible answer without hedging. He remains Sufei, yet he is also unquestionably Brendel inside this world, and when the vision ends, the wounded body sits alone beneath the windows, exhausted by undeath, combat, and existential paperwork, but the conclusion is unavoidable. This is genuine transmigration into the game world, not a bug, patch, or delayed logout anymore, with one savage drawback. Brendel's body is so weak that a scout skeleton nearly ended this second chance during the tutorial. So after briefly losing hope, he accepts the hand dealt and starts considering what useful abilities this unfamiliar body might possess, before realizing his future knowledge covers every disaster ahead, including Aeween's coming defeat within the approaching months of this year. And if time truly reversed, that knowledge could turn anyone into a savior rather than another spectator waiting for history, which hardens his choice. Sufei has returned to Aeween, and this time he intends to protect the kingdom properly from destruction, starting with a common tier longsword left on the floor. Unimpressive loot, but more than enough for basic survival in this body. Because Brendel originally died to a Madara scout skeleton, others may remain nearby, and his bleeding still demands immediate treatment. Yet a slash across an oil painting suggests the undead searched the room for something specific and ignored ordinary destruction, allowing his old player knowledge to identify the famous oil painting of Bouquet and the concealed compartment hidden behind its canvas, where one careful cut releases a silver ring, proving somebody stashed premium loot behind decor while everyone else farmed skeletons. And he recognizes the Ring of the Wind Empress, a god-tier starter reward from a quest erased in later patches, a counterfeit yet brutal relic granting 1 dexterity, 3 rechargeable wind bullets, and defense-ignoring area damage worth 100 points. So questions about how Brendel's grandfather obtained it can wait, because equipping mysterious family jewelry is currently the safest available decision, and the ring answers immediately, flooding his body with green wind energy as the former guild fighter finally receives a usable build. The ring's value almost makes him laugh, since owning it in his former life could have launched Sufei into the server's top 10, but approaching footsteps interrupt the fantasy, and he raises the longsword, while wondering whether Madara's undead have returned for another sweep, as slow impacts echo from the dark doorway, each one closing the distance while the wounded fighter waits outside their sightline, until armored feet cross the threshold and purple death energy announces something much sturdier than the skeleton he barely survived, revealing a heavily equipped skeletal swordsman, whose oversized frame upgrades the tutorial encounter into an unsolicited mini-boss round for him. Yet it walks past without noticing him, confirming basic skeleton soldiers retain the game's narrow 5-yard aggro range for now. And a second undead enters behind the first, leaving both occupied with searching the room instead of guarding their vulnerable flank, though he refuses a direct fight, knowing this body might lose to one enemy that his old avatar could erase casually. So Brendel trusts the body's memories, recalls medical bandages stored nearby, and forms a plan to reach them without trading attacks. By collecting a broken piece of wood from the wreckage and preparing the oldest stealth game tool in existence. A noisy distraction, then tossing it across the room, pulling both skulls toward the noise with a Metal Gear distraction requiring absolutely no cardboard box. Because low-level skeletons remain magnificently brain-dead, just as they were when players once kited entire packs into clean cooperative executions. But the first lure does not move them far enough, forcing him to risk another throw while his wound keeps draining strength, and the second piece lands deeper inside the hall, turning both armored heads away from the nearby doorway he needs, before their eyes flare bright red and the pair charges the false target, convinced that loose carpentry has declared war, leaving Brendel free to slip from cover and enter the unguarded room while the undead pursue sound down the corridor. Although every hurried step aggravates the corpse-rot wound, reminding him that clever pathing means nothing if he bleeds out afterward. Inside, overturned furniture and scattered books show the room was thoroughly searched, but its remaining cabinets may still hold medicine, and a portrait identifies the owner as Grandpa Brando, Brendel's November War veteran grandfather, somehow connected to Dilworth of the Four Saints, which raises another mystery for later, because finding those bandages before the bleeding finishes him remains the only quest that matters. The cabinet finally yields a clean roll of bandages, turning a nearly empty box into the best treasure chest he has opened tonight, and Sufei's remembered first aid skill lets him bind Brendel's abdomen, since health potions remain wildly expensive before the war, a market problem created by scarce brewing knowledge, with every early potion treated like luxury merchandise instead of normal adventuring supplies. So the simple dressing grants 1 point of health regeneration, modest healing that still buys his failing body desperately needed time, and that familiar effect encourages him to summon the status window, hoping the game's rules followed him across epochs too, which they have. The blue interface appears on command, giving him the first genuinely comforting evidence that his old knowledge still applies. Although its report lists Brando, level 1 commoner and militia, 60% weakened health, strength 1.0, dexterity 2.0, and unawakened elements, while the bandage condition restores only 1 health daily, confirming he remains inside the system, and healing will not rescue him quickly, then militia level 1 ruins the relief. And he asks Lady Martha whether this miserable starting build is some kind of test, because even fodder skeletons possess 1.5 strength while his NPC body has 1.0, basically Dark Souls mode without a bonfire, leaving escape as the only sensible play before Madara's hounds return, followed by an immediate report to the Buck Patrol, especially since every skeleton remains linked to its lich, meaning the commanders will notice their missing scouts sooner rather than later. But movement outside catches his attention before he can leave, pulling him carefully toward the window overlooking the nearby courtyard, where multiple cloaked liches gather below, turning the supposed escape route into an enemy command post rather than open ground. And their counting reveals 45 skeletons under one tally alone, while another lich separately tracks its own growing skeletal group, confirming 3 full squads and 3 liches, a standard Madara army unit, which means the First Black Rose War has officially begun, with at least 100 undead spread around the estate, far beyond anything his injured level 1 body can challenge, and likely controlled by a necromancer strong enough that even 10 copies of him would fail, leaving only Bakshi's patrol as backup. Down below, one robed commander demands the corpse of the male resident, since intelligence reported only 2 women living inside. But the nervous subordinate admits forgetting it, then notices something about their master and trails off before finishing the warning. The Lich Master completes the warning personally, sensing another living human inside the house and turning its hood toward the upper window, so he freezes against the wall, remembering that level suppression grants stronger enemies a perception bonus against low-level targets like him, while the commander orders a complete search in case someone discovered Madara's plan, sending every available subordinate toward the building, and the liches raise their staffs together, bathing the skeleton ranks in red energy before the whole force begins moving. With the front courtyard packed, he abandons that route and runs toward the rear, betting the house offers another exit, only to find several red-eyed skeletons already blocking the passage, because apparently undead search parties also understand basic interior coverage, and his exhausted expression says everything. One miracle ring does not make this ambush remotely fair, especially while he is bleeding, especially when a lich points straight at him and orders the skeletons to attack, instantly collapsing stealth into open pursuit. So he triggers the ring's wind ability, gathering blue currents around his arm while the mob closes from every direction, then releases the stored charge through an outstretched hand, and the supposedly starter-tier artifact answers with a violent roaring vortex that rips skeletons apart, tears stone from the walls, and launches him through the debris as the room becomes its own blender, leaving cracked masonry, drifting dust, and no standing attackers nearby. The ring clearly skipped the tutorial's property damage restrictions for low-level users. Although wind should deal only 30 damage in the game, this blast delivers absurd destruction and awards several small experience gains, before the system exposes a painful balance change. Each charge now needs 6 hours instead of the familiar 10 minutes, and the explosion announces his position to every lich outside, sending the courtyard commanders and surviving skeletons toward the ruined entrance, where one subordinate prepares a destructive fire spell, apparently ready to solve the intruder problem by igniting the entire estate, until the Lich Master stops that genius plan, warning that flames would attract the human army before Madara is ready, then orders him captured alive, giving the undead mob a target, and him exactly zero comfort whatsoever about their intentions. So he races deeper through the villa with another skeleton pack behind him, comparing the chase to his first 5-player dungeon run, but more undead cut off the hallway, forcing him toward the kitchen while he wonders how many entered during the host's unconsciousness. He bursts into the kitchen and slams the door behind him, turning the pantry into a desperate last-minute crafting station, then shoves furniture against it while skeleton blades punch through the wood, proving this barricade has durability measured in seconds, and admits he nearly failed to reach safety, although safety feels ambitious when sharpened steel keeps ventilating the door beside him. Still, he braces the makeshift barrier with everything available, buying precious time while the undead pile their weight against the entrance, and remembers Bushi's patrol also discovered Madara early in the original history, yet misunderstood its objective and helped doom the kingdom. Whether his presence caused that warning no longer matters. Contacting the patrol comes first, and the kitchen's flammable supplies suggest fire. Outside, an irritated lich orders the useless skeletons to tear down the door, unaware their quarry has switched from defense to arson. Flames erupt through the kitchen and engulf the barricade, startling the attackers with a counterplay that weaponizes every homeowner's worst insurance nightmare. The Lich Master immediately sends troops around back and demands they stop the brat escaping, as smoke reveals Brendel's improvised exit strategy. While the house burns, he apologizes to Grandpa Brando, dedicates the sacrifice to the kingdom, and trusts Captain Marden still has sense. At the patrol station, a guard blocks Miss Roman from entering, but she refuses to let protocol outlive the emergency outside. She tears into the patrol for ignoring explosions and flames near her home, ordering them to save people before arguing further. Her fury draws several armored officers into the hall, including a broad silver-haired captain and a poised blonde swordswoman behind him. Recognizing Captain Marden, Roman begs him to send firefighters before the blaze reaches Brando's neighboring home and earns her aunt's wrath. Marden agrees to dispatch help immediately, answering with the steadiness of someone who knows panicked civilians need action before explanations. Then the towering smoke column outside makes everyone look up, and Marden mutters that the troublesome kid has created a spectacular headache. The blonde swordswoman warns that midnight fire and explosions could signal an enemy raid. Noting the normally obedient youth needs serious cause, taking the implication seriously, Marden orders a messenger to sound a level 2 battle alert and personally leads the group toward Brando's home. Across the dark rooftops, the burning estate throws a massive plume into the sky, turning one kitchen escape into Buxie's warning beacon. Skeletons gather before the inferno, watching their quarry's cover become a roaring signal that may summon the patrol faster than any messenger. The Lich Master threatens to rip out his troops' bones and feed them to dogs if they ruin tonight's operation, despite their fear of fire, then orders them inside regardless of survival. Knowing the commotion may force Madara's attack early and leave him answering to his superior, driven harder than their self-preservation permits, armored skeletons charge through the burning entrance with swords raised and both liches directing the assault. Yet their target has already vaulted through a window, landing outside as the flaming pursuers spill after him like a bone-plated stampede. Every stride tears at the corpse rot wound in his abdomen, and this world's pain setting makes the original game feel merciful. He remembers that Captain Marden originally led the patrol out tonight, buying villagers evacuation time before Madara's first wave overwhelmed them. Now Bakshi and its surroundings already crawl with undead, so exposing Madara's true objective through the patrol becomes the kingdom's only chance. That mission immediately meets 4 armored skeleton warriors blocking the street, forcing the wounded runner to draw his sword without slowing. He realizes Madara's forces cover every route, confirming the burning estate was merely one node in a much larger night operation. Worse, these armored warriors are at least level 3, tougher than ordinary skeleton fodder and individually stronger than his starter militia body. They split into a flanking formation against one wounded rookie, prompting him to question whether Madara installed tournament-grade matchmaking overnight. Their discipline explains how Madara's junior officers later threatened the continent, and he knows prolonged combat would make survival impossible. The first warrior swings, but he meets the descending blade with his common sword, redirecting the strike instead of contesting raw strength. He twists through converging blades, using momentum to create space, but 3 more warriors immediately close from separate angles around him. Only then does he remember this body uses an NPC commoner template, rather than a player's hero template, making every mistake expensive. The experience from earlier kills surfaces in his thoughts, small glowing gains that might provide the single opening he desperately needs. He summons the status window mid-crisis, effectively opening a build menu while surrounded by enemies who definitely skip turn-based etiquette. Its display confirms 5 experience points and an available upgrade, while he remembers every class receives 3 fate-defying chances on its first level up. The option is real. Despite his weak attributes and recovering health, he can level a class immediately instead of waiting for safety. With enemies closing, he chooses Militia and activates the upgrade, betting his earned experience on combat ability rather than commoner knowledge. The upgrade completes. Militia reaches level 2. Its next threshold rises to 15 experience, while his weakened health stubbornly remains 60%. A green level-up glow surrounds him and momentarily checks the advancing skeletons, granting enough breathing room for the class's first-level reward screen. The system offers 3 completely random talents, preserving the game's idea of fairness by handing survival over to a celestial slot machine. Knowing even weak classes can dominate with a broken draw, he spends the first roll while asking Lady Martha for emergency-grade invincibility. Instead, he receives Eagle Eye, granting 30% farther vision and easier weak point detection, useful for ranged fighters but awkwardly timed here. As a melee fighter trapped at sword range, he judges the talent decent but currently about as comforting as binoculars in an elevator brawl. His second role produces Meditation, restoring mana periodically and faster below 30%, which means absolutely nothing to someone without spells. The final draw flashes gold and reveals Unyielding, a result whose name alone sounds considerably closer to the miracle he requested. Recognition replaces frustration instantly, because Unyielding is the premier top-tier talent for melee fighters, and precisely the lifeline this situation demands. The menu closes one heartbeat too late, and a skeleton drives its blade into his chest before he can celebrate the perfect roll. He collapses against the wall with blood spreading across his armor, while the attacker raises its weapon to finish the job. Barely conscious, he invokes the new talent by name, and golden light floods his eyes as Unyielding answers the emergency activation. Blue energy wraps his injured body and forces him upright, turning a fatal-looking wound into temporary combat time instead of immediate defeat. The nearest skeleton hesitates and identifies him as one of the undead, its red eyes failing to distinguish his suspended life state. Unyielding leaves his soul hovering between life and death, making ordinary undead stop attacking because their senses now register an ally. He immediately exploits their confusion, sweeping his sword through one warrior's neck and sending its skull spinning before the spell's window closes. As long as his heart and head remain intact, he knows he can keep retaliating despite the blood running from his mouth. The talent prevents blood loss unconsciousness for 5 minutes and death for 30, except through decapitation, heart destruction, or complete severing at the waist. With only one warrior left nearby, he attacks through the damage. But distant liches notice their troops have stopped treating him as hostile. A lich raises a red-lit staff and shouts an order to kill, restoring the skeleton's aggression before their borrowed mercy can become escape. The forced command overrides their confusion, sending a full pack charging after him while he wonders whether tonight ends with his second death. Before they reach him, Captain Marden and mounted patrol fighters vault into the street, challenging the rotten bones overrunning Butchie. Freya charges beside him on a white horse, her sweeping blade taking a skeleton's head while cavalry steal tears into the formation. The patrol line crashes through the undead ranks from both sides, transforming his hopeless encirclement into a brutal mounted counterattack. Marden recognizes him and asks about the fire, but the wounded survivor answers that Bucci faces a full-scale invasion, not a raid. When the captain calls that impossible, he insists Madara already surrounds Buche and targets the entire kingdom of Eru and beyond it. Marden reacts without wasting another breath, sending 2 riders to report to their superiors while ordering everyone else to clear the manor. Only after issuing commands does the survivor discover his body will not move, revealing Unyielding side effect precisely when retreat becomes possible. The borrowed strength vanishes and he pitches forward unconscious, proving 30 minutes without death does not include 30 minutes of useful mobility. Marden catches him beside the horse and urgently tells the kid to stay awake, but no response comes from the bloodied body. Still fighting, the blonde swordswoman decapitates another skeleton until Marden calls her by name, Freya, and orders her over immediately. Freya turns from the battle, startled by the captain's urgency while mounted fighters continue cutting down undead behind her in the street. He places the unconscious youth in her arms on horseback, leaving her visibly shocked by his weight, injuries, and sudden assignment. Marden explains the boy is badly hurt and knows too much about the undead to lose, ordering 3rd Squad to escort him to the rear fortress. Freya protests that she would rather remain fighting beside her captain, even while supporting the unconscious passenger against her armor. Marden makes clear this is an order, arguing the youth's knowledge could save tens of thousands if he reaches safety alive. As more skeletons flood the street, the captain volunteers his old bones as rear guard, turning his horse toward the incoming wave. Freya hesitates, grief and duty battling across her face as she realizes the order may be Marden's farewell rather than routine deployment. She finally obeys, raising her halberd and commanding 3rd Squad to move out and break through with their wounded charge. Behind them, Marden leads the remaining riders straight into the skeleton mass, buying the escort a narrow lane through Bushi's streets. Freya cleaves through one last skeleton during the retreat, silently promising Marden she will return with reinforcements as soon as possible. Back at the rear guard, Marden's horse takes a blade and throws him hard. Yet the veteran rises amid encircling skeletons. He answers their approach with a bare-fisted strike that shatters one skull. Refusing to let the undead dictate how his final stand begins, Calling himself a November War veteran, he spins through another attacker and separates armor, limbs, and skull with one sweeping counter. A memory recalls a friend promising marriage after their war, the kind of death flag even exhausted soldiers knew better than to announce. Accepting that he may join that old friend tonight, Martin rallies his remaining riders and charges the rotten skeletons without retreat. Meanwhile, 3rd Squad transports the unconscious survivor by horse-drawn cart through forest roads, keeping mounted guards around the precious passenger. Time passes until Sensation returns, his closed eyes stirring while the wagon continues far from the burning village and Martin's battle. He wakes disoriented beneath the open sky, unable to identify his location before pain and nearby voices pull the journey into focus. Roman leans over him in tears, relieved he finally woke after surviving wounds that had apparently convinced everyone he might die. She immediately calls Freya from horseback, announcing that Brando is awake while he lies bandaged in the moving cart below. By daylight, he manages to sit up with Roman's help, discovering pain more convincing than any full-dive helmet ever delivered. His status now shows 0 experience, militia level 2, and only 10% life under dying and weakened conditions, leaving him nearly helpless. Still, the condition has stabilized because unyielding includes regeneration, while stubborn raises willpower 10 tiers and ignores most physical damage during activation, except decapitation or heart destruction. At a riverside halt, Freya orders the Bucci militia's 3rd Squad to rest, giving horses and wounded passengers their first daylight pause. He tries standing from the cart, but Roman supports his shaking arm and warns that stubbornness will not repair wounds faster. Freya reinforces the medical verdict with command authority, ordering him to lie down immediately while keeping one hand near her weapon. Instead, he studies her standard Bucky militia equipment and notices an emblem belonging to the Temple of Flame, a detail that changes everything. Suspicion overtakes weakness, and he asks who she is despite everyone around him plainly treating her as the squad's commander. Freya formally identifies herself as captain of the Bucky militia's 3rd Squad, then repeats her order for the patient to lie down. The name, blonde hair, and holy emblem finally align. He has met the future Valkyrie Freya, a legendary figure still unaware of her path. He blurts out Freya Lucia's birth year and calls Grand Knight Everton her father, but she insists her father is merely a town carpenter. Nearby militiamen mistake the historical revelation for an ambitious pickup line, warning their captain that the wounded stranger is dangerously smooth. Freya blushes but silences the commentary, suggesting they would sound less foolish if they reduced their dialogue output. For once, ignoring the banter, he counts 7 or 8 fighters, exactly matching the standard composition of an Aween militia squad here. The group refills water beside the river, their ordinary armor and exhausted movements confirming this escort carries no hidden elite reserve. Seeing women and children enlisted reminds him how corruption hollowed Aween, whose coming glamorous resurgence will only drain its final vitality. Reliving this bleak history feels cruel even for a veteran player, especially knowing this ordinary village girl is Everton's daughter and Aween's future Valkyrie. With Madara's encirclement tightening, he resolves to save Romaine, Freya, and everyone present because Aween's revival needs far more survivors. Freya notices his attention and nervously asks whether he needs something. Still unsettled by the stranger, who apparently knows her unwritten biography, he reassures her and asks the entire squad to discuss their situation, shifting from awkward prophecy toward the immediate survival problem. First, he confirms they are beside the Red Pine River and learns Martin ordered them toward Riedenberg's rear fortress to report. Freya answers despite herself, privately wondering why his presence feels stronger than Captain Martin's and why she keeps following his questions. He deduces they abandoned the direct Elson Road because undead concentrations forced their breakout onto the smaller path around Red Pine Forest. Freya recoils because he remained unconscious throughout that choice, making his accurate reconstruction feel less like deduction and more like surveillance. He calmly credits basic military knowledge, presenting the inference as obvious enough that anyone trained should have reached the same conclusion. Then he asks whether they understand the crisis, drawing every resting militiaman into a briefing that quickly strips away false reassurance. Heavy undead already block the main road, cutting communications and clearing a corridor before Buckeye becomes a base for purging regional Aoween forces. Their commander is Black Lord Instadragon, now a reckless young man but destined to become Madara's renowned general. Originally only Freya escaped. After laying out that near-certain death trap, he asks the squad what they should do next, leaving them staring as if he just autopsied their entire route. One fighter proposes breaking north to reinforce Martin, but another immediately warns that undead fill that direction and make it suicidal. Future knowledge offers 2 escape routes. The western pointed Stone River Valley remains open 17 days, but lies too far beyond their shrinking window. The southern Dagger River Beach holds only 11 skeletons under 1 lich, and his Wind Empress ring makes that force beatable. If everyone obeys, hands stacked together as the group accepts the plan, sealing a fragile command agreement built more on necessity than established trust. Romaine quietly asks whether they are truly going to die, but he promises they will not and asks her to trust him. When he claims the inconclusive debate leaves room for his plan, one skeptical fighter mocks the wounded strategist until a younger militiaman demands silence. He identifies Dagger River Beach's exact defense: one lich and roughly 11 skeletons, then dodges questions by saying knowledge does not always require eyesight. Freya asks whether this method can bring everyone out alive, placing command responsibility squarely on the man who somehow knows the battlefield. He promises only preparation and the best possible result, insisting everyone must follow his commands completely if they expect to reach Riedenburg alive. Before Freya can answer, rustling erupts from the brush, and she reaches for her weapon while demanding whoever approaches identify themselves. A battered militiaman emerges and identifies himself to Captain Freya, apparently returning from reconnaissance with exhaustion written across his damaged armor. Freya recognizes him as Josen and steps forward, but the wounded strategist suddenly spots danger and shouts for her to watch out. He grabs her wrist and yanks her sideways just before a red magical strike detonates the ground where she had been standing. Pulling Freya clear, he recognizes an ambush and challenges the hidden attacker to emerge. While she stares at his timing in disbelief, a towering lich answers from the trees with red magic glowing along one arm, calling the trapped militia a collection of little mice. Josen lies captured beside it, apologizing for leading the enemy back because the lich threatened his life, while his comrades call him traitor. The lich silences its unwilling guide by blasting him with red energy, discarding the scout the instant his usefulness ends. Josen crumples on the road as the lich warns everyone against reckless movement, demonstrating exactly what its hostage policy considers acceptable restraint. Then red-eyed skeletons close around the squad, and their master announces it will handle the remaining mice now that the bait has expired. Freya covers her mouth in horror at Josen's treatment, realizing the creature used terror, betrayal, and execution as one seamless ambush tactic. He steadies Freya, explaining the execution was deliberate psychological warfare designed to shatter their fighting spirit before the skeletons even engage. She absorbs the warning and regains focus, forcing grief behind a hardened expression while the enemy formation finishes closing around them. Romaine clings to his arm and admits the skeletons terrify her, but he remains still, measuring the battlefield instead of offering empty comfort. One armored skeleton answers the lich's summons, eyes blazing red, as it calls Madara's warriors from the surrounding woods forward. Ranks of armed undead pour between the trees behind their master, revealing an encirclement far larger than the beach defense Brendel expected. Freya raises her halberd and orders third squad into formation, while the adults draw steel and answer the Bone Army's advance with defiance. A senior fighter pushes the blonde youth behind the front line, insisting the children stay clear instead of joining the coming melee. The Lich sends its troops forward and offers surrender as rations for Madara's army, somehow making captivity sound less appealing than combat. At that moment, the Wind Empress ring finishes charging, blue currents spiraling around him as he promises the undead a swift answer. Freya meets the first attackers head-on, driving her blade between two skeletons, while cursing the creatures for threatening her squad. Makmi and another militiaman lock swords with separate opponents, their courage holding even when skill and stamina offer no comfortable advantage. Freya sweeps one skeleton aside with her polearm and kicks another backward, creating space while the patrol struggles to preserve formation. After traveling all night, everyone's strength is fading, so she concludes the Lich must die before its tireless soldiers grind them down. Even the young blonde fighter deflects crossing blades from both sides, refusing to stay back while the front line buckles around him. Watching their weak combat but undeniable courage, Brendel recognizes a stalemate they cannot sustain because skeleton stamina has no expiration bar. He restores discipline by invoking their training. Stop attacking recklessly, because level 1 and level 2 skeletons remain manageable while the Lich reaches level 5. Romaine watches the wounded man take command and wonders when the familiar Brando became this reliable. Because yesterday's version certainly lacked raid leader energy, he explains skeletons recover slowly after slashing, then orders Makmi to draw attention and create an opening for Isen's counterattack. Makmi swallows his doubts and braces as the assigned target, facing a descending sword with no room to improvise beyond the plan. The skeleton commits to its overhead slash exactly as predicted, presenting Makmi with the dangerous opening his commander promised would appear. Makmi pivots away after the slash, and the second fighter rushes through the gap before the skeleton can reset its guard. Their blades cross around the exposed undead, one holding its weapon low while the other attacks from the blind side exactly as instructed. Isen capitalizes with a crushing strike to the skull, proving that precise timing can turn ordinary militia strength into decisive damage. The skeleton collapses into scattered armor and bones, leaving Makmi and Isen staring at a clean kill neither expected to achieve so efficiently. Isen exhales in disbelief and realizes he actually succeeded, his first coordinated victory doing more for morale than any heroic speech could. Makmi immediately calls Brando a genius, and the pair stand back-to-back with renewed confidence while more skeletons crowd toward them. The kill awards their strategist one experience point. To him, the maneuver is merely knowledge forged across thousands of game battles. He identifies the Lich as the decisive obstacle while red-black magic coils through the battlefield, strengthening its presence behind the advancing skeleton screen. Furious that a wounded human disrupted its troops, the Lich plans elaborate torture after killing everyone else, then notices the ring and pauses. The patient fighter lowers one glowing hand beside his sword, quietly presenting the artifact while forcing his enemy to reassess the encounter. The Lich recognizes the ring immediately, its greed shifting from battlefield control toward the treasure gleaming on the wounded man's finger. Deciding to seize it, the creature casts more red magic and commands every available skeleton to kill the wounded soldier first. Armored and unarmored undead abandon their current targets and surge toward the ring bearer, turning the artifact into an irresistible aggro beacon. Romain warns that they are being surrounded again, but he draws his sword and promises to protect her despite the closing swarm. Internally, confidence becomes arithmetic. He has only one health point, so any scratch can kill him while difficulty keeps climbing. Freya orders nearby fighters to protect him. Stunned that Madara's forces suddenly ignore everyone else and converge on one wounded target, he tells young Vic to maintain melee defense, then sends Freya and Ison toward the Lich while he manages the skeleton pressure. Freya accepts the opening he created and charges straight through the formation, cape streaming behind her as she targets the commander. Meanwhile, he and Vic coordinate high and low attacks, severing one skeleton's upper body while slipping beneath intersecting blades around them. He recalls low-level Lich magic. Shroud of Darkness conceals undead movement, while the prepared Curse of Decay delivers the surprise attack already used. He shouts that dark magic requires visible hand gestures, directing Freya and Ison to interrupt the Lich before its spell completes. The Lich recoils at this impossible tactical knowledge, wondering how an ordinary human understands techniques its kind treats as guarded secrets. Ison launches an overhead strike, but the Lich instantly forms a swirling black shield that catches his blade before it reaches bone. His sword rebounds from the rotating barrier with a blue arc, revealing that closing distance is easier than piercing the caster's defense. Shock freezes Ison for one dangerous beat, until Brendel calls out another threat approaching from his left flank without warning. Freya crashes through the surrounding dark tendrils with a bright slash, rescuing Ison and keeping pressure on their suddenly cornered commander. The Lich answers with a violent surge of shadow, sweeping its cloak and magic outward to drive both attackers away. Realizing no common militiaman should command this efficiently, the enraged creature demands the identity of the human, dismantling its entire playbook. Brendel refuses the introduction, declaring only that the Lich must die today while remaining locked among skeletons at sword range. Freya charges again and brings her greatsword down against the Lich's raised staff, trading finesse for one brutally direct interruption. The impact exposes a harsh level gap. She immediately realizes the Lich possesses far greater physical strength than its skeletal soldiers. A counterblow hurls Freya backward across the road, leaving blood on her arm while the Lich's spherical defense holds firm. She warns young Vic to retreat from the dangerous caster. While Brendel feels last night's wounds tear open beneath his bandages, Vic insists he belongs to the militia too. Brendel praises the boy's courage, steadying him without pretending this fight is safe. He assigns the formation. Freya targets the staff hand, while Vic and Ison distract the Lich and create her opening. Freya silently weighs the wounded commander's reckless proposal, recognizing that every assigned role depends on timing rather than individual power. Calling him reckless, she raises her greats or accepts the gamble. With Ison ready behind her for another coordinated rush, Brendel, Freya, and Ison sprint toward the withdrawing Lich from 3 angles. While Vic follows at the distance his role requires, Freya reaches striking range first and lifts her blade overhead, committing everything to the staff-bearing arm instead of the body. Her luminous downswing forces the Lich to raise its staff, exactly the defensive reaction Brendel designed the entire formation to produce. Catching Brendel's corpse rot scent, the Lich suspects its marked target is already near death, yet senses another possibility behind the weakness. It abandons the obvious exchange, chants an unfamiliar incantation, and decides killing the strategist first will make everyone else easy prey. The caster vanishes without any visible gesture. Brendel recognizes a shadow surprise attack and warns everyone that their opponent remains dangerously cunning. Shadow magic deposits the Lich directly behind him with a killing strike prepared, turning his accurate warning into an immediate survival test. Brendel pivots before the ambush lands and unleashes a sweeping blue-edged counter, shredding the shadow cloak around his exposed attacker. The Lich wonders whether he carries a silver lineage, but Brendel cuts short both speculation and the customary boss monologue tax. One clean rising slash severs the Lich's skull from its robed body, ending the commander before another spell or sentence can follow. Elsewhere, Madara's vanguard leadership gathers around a regional map where an armored vampire furiously demands who authorized the premature attack. The speaker is Vampire Baron Tagus Manline, Vanguard Army Commander, whose scarred eye and claws make the room's hierarchy immediately obvious. Across the long table, a hooded subordinate faces the commander's anger while several silent undead officers wait for an explanation. Identified as Necromancer Roscoe, the sweating culprit struggles to begin his report under the combined attention of Madara's assembled leadership. Roscoe claims his forces unexpectedly encountered a human scout inside the village, causing an unscheduled clash with Bucci's militia there. Pressed for results, he admits the scout escaped and offers only that his undead inflicted heavy wounds upon the militia. An imposing skeletal officer openly condemns Roscoe for disrupting Lord Targus's deployment and allowing the human target to escape anyway. Before the accusation spread, Tagus orders silence and restores military discipline, demanding facts while the briefing now continues without interruption. The skeletal officer falls completely quiet, its confidence replaced by a nervous stare beneath Tagus's controlled anger and unquestioned authority. Tagus studies the regional map without speaking, shifting immediately from punishment toward the larger operation now moving ahead of schedule. He orders Kabais to destroy the village before sunrise, while Vesa and Eberton attack Webben and Seal Dagger River Beach. Calling them nobles of darkness, Tagus demands swift execution and promises Madara's lasting national pride once their offensive captures Riedenburg. Every officer answers with a unified victory chant for Madara, closing the briefing as multiple attack groups mobilize under revised orders. Back at the riverside camp, Vic stirs a bubbling lunch so bland that another fighter wonders whether they are eating heated dishwater. Brendel spends all available experience learning battlefield first aid from Freya, then applies the money-saving game skill to his own wounds. A militiaman urges immediate retreat, but their captain reveals the harsher problem. Insufficient food means the squad cannot reach Riedenburg. He suggests resupplying at a nearby village, only for Freya to explain that scouting blindly among Madara's undead would be suicidal. Rather than argue with incomplete information, the wounded strategist asks the assembled militia whether anyone brought a map at all. Freya admits she has none and believes only guard headquarters possesses one, leaving their route planning dependent on memory alone. He remembers why. Carrying maps without Holy Temple authorization marks a person as a spy, making cartography surprisingly dangerous equipment. Unable to access official charts, he asks Romain for the sword and prepares a field solution directly on the ground. Using the blade and several sticks, he scratches a simple tactical map into the dirt while everyone gathers around in confusion. He realizes even Aween's noble academies neglect tactics, explaining why ordinary militia never learned maps and Madara caught the kingdom unprepared. The improvised map locates Buche, Qing Village, Webben, Riedenburg, and their current position, astonishing companions who considered map-making exceptional knowledge. Freya privately wonders where he learned the skill, because even veteran Captain Marden cannot successfully construct a map like this. Romain recognizes Riedenburg on the drawing with suspicious enthusiasm, immediately catching the entire nearby group's attention. Despite her innocent expression, Freya and Vic begin laughing together. While their baffled strategist asks what secret joke the map has apparently unlocked now, Vic reveals Romain once tried reaching Riedenburg for grand business, got lost halfway, and required Uncle Seer's rescue. She denies everything. Returning to logistics, he proposes nearby Qing Village for supplies, but Freya answers that Madara's current offensive has certainly overrun it. He counters that slaughter-focused undead ignore provisions, so the squad can infiltrate in formation, avoid battle, and recover the abandoned rations. Vic hears squad formation and translates it directly into infiltration, celebrating their grim supply mission like an unlocked stealth quest. Brendel chooses Isen and Freya to accompany him while everyone else guards camp nearby, prompting immediate objections from those excluded. Freya accepts Isen as her partner but insists their wounded guide must remain behind, treating his survival as the mission's highest priority. Brendel asks whether his injury is the sole reason she keeps benching him, forcing Freya to acknowledge that concern directly. Blushing despite herself, she answers that his understanding is sufficient, revealing more personal worry than her formal command voice intended. He argues infiltration requires planning and reconnaissance only he can provide. While privately targeting a second beginner artifact hidden within Qing Village, Freya offers to follow his instructions instead, insisting he can devise the operation while healthier fighters handle its physical execution. Finding persuasion useless, he grips his sword and proposes a more decisive way to settle quickly whether he is fit. He invokes an ancient tradition and challenges Freya to a duel, making combat performance the final test for joining the mission. Vic and another militiaman stare in disbelief, convinced a badly wounded man cannot even lift steel against their squad's strongest swordswoman. Freya suspects another joke and demands an explanation, visibly irritated that he would gamble his damaged body on this argument. He takes position with his blade lowered and asks her not to restrain herself, inviting the full strength everyone else fears. She accepts that exact condition, raising her heavy sword with both hands as the watching militia clears space around them. Freya explodes forward with an airborne opening strike, and he catches the descending blade while its force carves wind across the clearing. Her raw power immediately strains his weakened body, but he refuses to fold because only a convincing display will change her decision. Redirecting the pressure, he executes the Kato reverse cut from formation swordsmanship, sliding past her guard instead of contesting strength. Freya realizes too late that her supposedly helpless opponent has transformed a desperate block into a precise counterattack she cannot read. Shocked, she demands the technique's identity. He casually calls it improvised swordsmanship and asks whether she will finally concede defeat. In truth, he learned crux formation swordsmanship from a mercenary for 2 barrels of Madara bone wine. Though weakness limits its disarming power, Freya refuses defeat and attacks again. Knowing attrition favors her healthy body, he decides the next exchange must finish everything. She drives a low horizontal slash toward his legs, while he braces his sword high and lets the attack commit fully. A sudden realization hits Freya mid-strike, but her momentum now leaves no time to recover the opening she has exposed. His counter flashes behind her shoulder and across the space beside her neck, converting her aggressive lunge into apparent checkmate. Holding the blade at her throat without cutting, Brendel declares the demonstration convincing and waits for Freya to honor their wager. Romain cheers his victory while Vic and the militia stare speechlessly, watching their strongest fighter lose to someone barely standing yesterday. When the winner playfully offers Vic the next duel, the suddenly cautious boy declines and recommends they continue without him. Freya accepts the result and announces that Brendel and Isen will accompany her to Qing village while everyone else guards camp. The selected trio answers together, then immediately leaves the riverside clearing and follows a wooded route toward the fallen settlement. As they travel, their guide's expression now hardens around the hidden objective that made risking this dangerous expedition personally worthwhile. According to remembered game progression, the divine sword should still remain sealed there inside its chained tomb beneath the village. By nightfall, the trio advances through dense undergrowth, using the forest edge to approach without exposing themselves on open ground. Freya spots the settlement ahead and confirms it as Green Village. While he notes that Madara's army has already swept through, multiple fires consume buildings beneath towering smoke columns, turning the village horizon into proof that occupation followed massacre everywhere below. Inside the ruined streets, a necromancer channels red energy into human corpses as skeleton patrols march past the newly raised dead. From concealment, Brendel counts approximately 5 tactical squads inside the village, totaling 55 to 60 skeletons and 2 supporting necromancers. Isen reacts with alarm to the numbers, realizing their 3-person supply run has reached a fully functioning undead garrison there. Their guide explains the necromancers are the real threat. Controlling the cemetery and square lets raised dead continuously replenish Madara's losses. Rather than challenge that engine directly, he points beyond the burning center toward a quieter destination on the village outskirts. The pasture granary should contain untouched smoked meat and sausages, so he orders them to cross quietly behind fences and bushes. Freya immediately questions how someone from Buchi possesses such suspiciously detailed knowledge of Green Village's ruined buildings and surrounding terrain. He claims childhood familiarity with the area, but her narrowed eyes make clear that this convenient explanation has failed inspection. Internally, he admits the story is only technically honest. In the Amber Sword, he cleared this location dozens of times. Isen asks what happens after they reach the granary, and Freya realizes with surprise that their guide does not intend to accompany them. Brendel confirms he has a separate objective and asks Freya to trust him, refusing to expose the hidden tomb or divine sword. She hesitates silently, caught between the confidence he has earned and the obvious danger now surrounding one severely wounded fighter. Freya finally admits she is worried about him. He promises to return safely despite the skeletons occupying every nearby route. She and Isen depart toward the pasture, leaving their guide alone to cross the darker forest leading toward the village center. He acknowledges his route may kill him. Green Village is the game's first 5-person newbie dungeon, and tonight he has no party. Crossing its boundary suddenly triggers a system notification that he has entered the level 5 dungeon called Green Village's Sorrow. The familiar message brings uncomfortable nostalgia because he once farmed this dungeon repeatedly until even its routine quickly became exhausting. 2 armored skeletons patrol ahead while he hides behind a tree, studying their spacing before attempting the dangerous solo approach. He can defeat 1 skeleton reliably, but considers 2 squads difficult. Worse, the hidden tomb of Durandid appears only once. Inside waits Dazzling Light Thorn, an overpowered beginner divine weapon, and an old forum guide tells him where its key lies. Several armored patrolmen move between the burning buildings, forcing him to create an opening instead of simply walking toward his objective. From concealment, he throws a small stone against the wall, producing a sharp impact that immediately turns one skeleton's head. The alerted undead breaks from the patrol to investigate, exactly as the hidden intruder intended when selecting the isolated corner. He drops from above with both hands on his sword, brutally converting the skeleton's curiosity into a lethal overhead ambush. A broad follow-through removes its skull and carries his blade toward the next enemy. But the remaining patrol has already noticed. 3 skeletons turn their glowing eyes toward him together, replacing a controlled assassination with the multi-enemy fight he wanted to avoid. The first kill awards 1 experience point, and he drives forward before the surrounding undead can fully coordinate their response. Though adapting to Brendel's body, he finds its base stats too poor for stronger sword techniques as another skeleton attacks. Multiple blades converge together, forcing him to catch their crossing strikes at once while his wounded frame absorbs the pressure. He redirects 1 weapon and unleashes Kato's reversal slash, sending another skull spinning away while the surviving skeleton presses closer. 2 undead remain active. 1 advances with its sword while the other turns away, threatening to alert the larger garrison. Brendel realizes these low-level soldiers behave far more intelligently than their game versions, making the fleeing messenger the urgent target. Unable to prolong the encounter, he kicks the nearer skeleton violently backward and creates enough space to stop the runner. The blow launches his attacker off balance, briefly removing its weapon and armor from the path between him and the escapee. He follows by stomping the fallen skeleton's chest plate, firmly pinning it long enough to execute his riskier finishing sequence. Using the pinned body as leverage, he springs upward and whips his sword toward the undead already fleeing down the street. Basic military swordsmanship's throwing sword technique sends the blade forward in a blue arc, sacrificing his weapon for immediate range. The spinning sword strikes the runner and pins it against a tree, preventing any warning from reaching the nearby squads. With one enemy immobilized, Brendel suddenly seizes the remaining skeleton's skull bare-handed before it can fully rise beneath him again. He violently twists the head completely free from its armored body, ending the close-range threat without needing his distant sword. The burst leaves him collapsing onto the stones, his exhausted body paying immediately for every movement the tactics demanded below. 2 more kills each award 1 experience point, yet barely 10 seconds of combat has already completely emptied his stamina. Remembering the guide, he reaches the indicated corner beneath the large tree. 2 patrol squads due within 3 minutes. He digs rapidly but finds nothing where the post clearly described, turning his precious countdown into an increasingly suspicious excavation. At Green Village Square, the undead report their sentry dead and now identify an intruder beside the large roadside tree. Still unaware the garrison has pinpointed him, he drives his sword beneath a concealed slab and finally strikes something solid. He lifts a dirt-covered wooden box from the hole, revealing that the guide's location was accurate despite the initial scare. Inside, a golden 3-toothed key rests quietly on red cloth, intact and waiting exactly where the old forum instructions promised. Its presence confirms dazzling light thorn remains inside the tomb, turning one successful loot check into proof the prize still exists. Before celebrating further, he hears approaching movement and turns sharply, realizing the search has consumed nearly all his safe window. A mass of armored skeletons charges straight down the burning street, transforming his narrow escape route into an entire undead rush hour. Seeing half the village's skeletons converging, Brendel recognizes that retrieving the key has also pulled the garrison directly onto him. Meanwhile, Freya and Isen watch the small patrol guarding their approach. Unaware that the distant alarm is about to change everything, Isen proposes eliminating the few skeletons immediately, but his captain keeps studying the route instead of accepting such suspiciously easy bait. Freya warns that necromancers remain inside the village and chooses patience, planning to exploit a safer opening for their infiltration later. Then every skeleton suddenly abandons its post, leaving Isen astonished while Freya correctly suspects Brendel has triggered serious trouble elsewhere. That trouble surrounds him completely. As the responding squad's close ranks around their lone intruder with enough steel for a skeleton convention, he dryly welcomes the entire reunion of old acquaintances, deciding this unexpected crowd can clear the battlefield before his next operation. Rather than retreat, he raises his longsword and steps into the encirclement, apparently answering overwhelming numbers with one more calculated gamble. He lifts the blade overhead and activates the desperate talent that previously kept his ruined body moving beyond every normal limit. The skeletons hesitate instead of striking, their red eyes fixed on him as the surrounding attack abruptly loses its murderous momentum. Unyielding activates with a 5-minute countdown, flooding him with dark energy and giving his battered body another strictly temporary power window. The sensation differs sharply from before, making him suspect that activating Unyielding while weakened has produced an unexpected side effect. That side effect works beautifully. Ordinary undead now perceive him as one of their own, letting him walk through the confused formation. Because the disguise lasts only 5 minutes, he reserves a safety margin and heads toward the tomb without challenging his borrowed immunity. Skeletons ranging from basic soldiers to stronger armored units simply watch him pass, apparently ranking their bleeding visitor as a minor boss. He reaches the village's damaged church alone, finding the imposing sanctuary standing above the hidden destination described by the old guide. The Holy Temple of Fire built this shrine over the tomb to deter grave robbers, while Unyielding's countdown drops to 3:49. Brendel inserts the golden key into the sanctuary door and rushes inside, spending no extra second admiring the institution's anti-loot architecture. Within the blue-lit hall, a hidden floor panel suddenly opens ahead of him, revealing the descent beneath the shrine at last. Descending, he credits the original quest discoverer as a genuine genius for reconstructing this location from scattered references to Paladin Gironde. Gironde fought uprightly in Eowyn's War of Independence, and requested burial at home, so grateful locals constructed this tomb for him. With Unyielding still draining away, Brendel follows the narrow stone stairway downward and finally enters the concealed underground burial chamber. The stairs open above a broad crypt containing one central coffin and looming winged statues, all washed in cold blue light. Its scale confirms Gironde held considerable status in life, though the oversized guardian sculptures make that prestige feel immediately expensive. One supposed statue awakens with glowing red eyes and a deafening roar, revealing claws, horns, wings, and extremely unfriendly masonry. Brendel approaches the coffin because the guide placed azure light thorn inside, but its unfinished warning becomes suddenly relevant behind him. The guardian grabs him from behind before he can react, lifting his wounded body effortlessly and exposing the trap omitted from memory. Feeling those claws, he identifies a gargoyle whose power exceeds his by at least 4 energy levels, making swordplay mathematically suicidal. The creature is level 23 and carries him upward like captured loot, a brutal mismatch against his weakened level 2 militia body. It accelerates through the chamber with wings spread, dragging its struggling prisoner into a spiraling aerial path above the coffin. Worse, he recognizes the gargoyle as a masterpiece produced by Buga's wizard craftsman, explaining why this guardian feels wildly overqualified. He curses the forum guide for never mentioning its lethal existence and reaches desperately for his sword while still trapped midair. Breaking loose, he drops toward the floor as the gargoyle immediately dives after him, denying even one peaceful landing frame. He slams down inside a circular shockwave, using the fall to regain separation before the pursuing monster can seize him again. Brendel lands upright with longsword ready, blood still staining his bandages as the chamber becomes an arena he cannot escape casually. The gargoyle roars and gathers purple force around its airborne body, preparing another direct charge instead of respecting his drawn blade. Its pressure rolls across the crypt in expanding rings while he holds position beneath it, measuring the descending attack's final angle. With only 110 remaining on Unyielding, he promises to kill the arrogant guardian quickly, turning desperation into a very strict speed run. The level 23 gargoyle answers by diving claws first through the blue light, committing its full weight to the next collision. Brendel channels blue wind around his hands and launches his longsword upward, disrupting the gargoyle's charge before it reaches him. The spinning blade streaks past its target, forcing the guardian away while gathering the distance needed for his real counterattack. He refuses to let the creature retreat after attacking him, wearing the grin of someone whose cooldown has finally become relevant. Raising the ring of the Wind Empress, he releases a towering wind vortex that expands across the crypt toward the airborne guardian. The gargoyle looks back in sudden alarm, discovering far too late that its underleveled opponent brought one exceptionally unfair accessory. The wind bullet catches it inside a roaring cyclone, shredding stone from the chamber and driving the massive construct violently backward. Its body crashes into the far wall hard enough to crater the masonry, yet the engineered guardian remains only temporarily disabled. With 60 health and extremely high defense, one wind bullet cannot kill it. Meanwhile, Unyielding has only 50 seconds remaining. He rushes the stunned gargoyle before it can recover, raising his sword overhead to exploit its single brief vulnerable opening. The guardian spreads its wings and struggles upright, but Brendel stays directly above its torso and commits to the finishing strike. Desperate for the creature to die before his talent expires, he drives every remaining ounce of strength through the descending blade. The attack smashes into the floor with a circular blast, scattering broken stone around him. As the gargoyle finally collapses beneath it, 30 experience points confirm the level 23 guardian's death. Rewarding an encounter where victory depended entirely on timing and borrowed power, his body grows steadily heavier as Unyielding nears expiration, so he abandons celebration and staggers directly toward Gironde's waiting coffin. With 12 seconds left, he braces both hands against the lid and forces it open before his surviving strength disappears. Golden light spills upward from the coffin, illuminating his startled face and revealing something immediately useful among Gironde's burial objects. Recognizing the item, he marvels that the mourners thoughtfully included such surprisingly practical medicine there among the paladin's funerary offerings. It is holy water number 7, Tamara's mass-produced beginner medicine from the year of the new flower, and a game essential. At 1 second remaining, he drinks the entire bottle, recognizing its pure taste just as old gaming memories rush back. Green healing light restores him to full energy and 10 health, finally removing weakened completely before Unyielding's borrowed time ends. Fully recovered, he turns back to the open coffin, finally reaches for its ornate blue and silver sword. The dungeon's promised reward, Thorn of Azure Light, is a legendary elven longsword, described as born from light and capable of making every enemy tremble. Only 3 of 17 such blades remain because Madara's Dark Lords collected and destroyed most of the original legendary set. Touching it triggers a memory of 2 men shaking hands, one refusing heroic promises while the other trusts his passionate heart. Another vision shows Gironde defiantly rallying Eowyn's soldiers beneath torn banners, ordering them never to retreat and fight until death. For saving Eowyn through selflessness and courage, Gironde receives the Paladin title in Marsh's name alongside Thorn of Azure Light. Time eventually claims his mortal body, leaving the aged Paladin preserved beside his sword while his life still becomes legend. Blue radiance gathers above the coffin and Gironde's armored spirit appears, startling Brendel with a direct meeting beyond recorded memory. The dead Paladin extends his hand and asks whether this young man is willing to inherit the path he left behind. Visions answer with a black-haired knight fighting beside allies, cutting through undead giants, and advancing beneath a brilliant golden sky. Accepting what that path demands, Brendel smiles and reaches toward the spirit's offered gauntlet without any visible hesitation at all. He answers yes without hesitation and firmly clasps Gironde's hand, consciously sealing the inheritance as golden light floods their surroundings. Satisfied, the old paladin smiles and dissolves peacefully into glittering motes. Leaving his chosen successor with the completed final trial, the Tomb of Gironde quest completes, awarding Thorn of Azure Light and unlocking a mercenary soldier class certificate for 30 experience. A system prompt offers him level 1 mercenary soldier in exchange for 30 experience points, presenting an immediate second reward. The class name makes him realize this inheritance can open a warrior progression route unavailable through his militia training alone. He immediately selects yes without further delay, converting the Guardian's fresh experience reward into the newly discovered specialized combat class. Golden Light confirms the class change to mercenary soldier, permanently strengthening him beyond the temporary tricks that carried him inside. His status now shows 9 XP, level 1 mercenary soldier, stronger physical attributes, and charge as the warrior class's starting skill. Carrying both the beginner artifact and a new class, he concludes the dangerous detour succeeded almost suspiciously well. Perhaps fate arranged it. A heavy rumble suddenly shakes the crypt around him, violently interrupting his triumph and sending dust cascading through the chamber. Suspecting trouble outside, he decides to collect every useful battle spoil immediately and leave before the underground structure answers more questions. The remaining offerings include a gargoyle amulet and holy water, number 5, an even stronger medicine than the bottle just consumed. Since every item was deliberately placed together, he takes them all and sprints upstairs, letting urgency settle the archaeological ethics. He wonders how the waiting undead fared, but his improved stats and Thorn of Azure Light make ordinary skeletons manageable now. Outside, several armored skeletons still patrol the burning square, turning toward the shrine as their former disguised visitor finally emerges. Brendel suddenly charges them directly, treating the surviving squad as live practice for his new sword and permanently improved body. His first luminous swing tears through one skeleton's heavily armored torso so cleanly that its upper body separates before counterattacking. Continuing the rotation without stopping, he sweeps the blue blade through a second opponent and removes its armored skull mid-stride. Thorn of Azure Light inflicts double damage against Madara's undead, explaining exactly why the Dark Lords hunted its legendary siblings. Free from weakened and strengthened beyond a full level by mercenary soldier, he quickly kicks another skeleton violently off balance. The armored target crashes backward across the stones, its raised weapon useless against his newly dominant speed and physical strength. Another red-eyed soldier attempts to rise dangerously within striking distance, but his momentum already carries the enchanted blade toward it. A club-wielding skeleton suddenly approaches from behind while he crouches low, seemingly creating the perfect opening for a cheap ambush. Instead, his sword erupts upward in a bright blue arc, cutting through the attacker before its descending club can connect. The exchange ends with skeletons scattered in shattered pieces around him, Thorn's golden motes floating above a suddenly silent square. 2 kills award 1 experience point each, but he notices most of the earlier garrison vanished, possibly toward the recent explosion. Flames erupt from the pasture direction, instantly replacing his confidence with fear that something has happened to Freya and Isen. More skeletons crowd the adjoining street, forming another nearby obstacle between him and the burning destination where his companions disappeared. Brendel accelerates toward them, silently begging Freya and Isen to remain unharmed while he desperately races across the occupied village. A robed undead commander spots the approaching human and orders every nearby skeleton to kill him, redirecting the street patrol immediately. Refusing a prolonged fight, he quickly invests his experience into Mercenary Soldier, reaching level 2 with 13 of 30 progression. Charge immediately multiplies burst speed tenfold for a surprise attack, carries a strict 1-minute cooldown and cannot activate while weakened. The alarmed undead commander orders its soldiers to stop him, but the warning arrives after his new skill has already launched. Brendel tears through their formation faster than their weapons can follow, openly dismissing the entire squad as almost painfully slow. His blue arc reaches the robed commander itself, severing the caster before its raised staff can produce any defensive spell. He dedicates the strike to Qing Village's fallen people, turning Gironde's inherited blade against the faction that destroyed their home. Tightening his grip on Thorn's jeweled hilt, he maintains the offensive rather than allowing the surrounding undead to recover formation. Standing amid fire and broken enemies, he declares that Madara's forces have finally become the side running out of luck. Elsewhere in the burning village, mounted Buche militia riders now advance carefully through streets filled with smoke and scattered remains. Their blonde vice-captain, Bryson, raises a fist and halts the column after noticing something deeply unusual across the road ahead. His men nervously wonder whether enemies are nearby. While the leading riders study the silent street instead of charging blindly forward, Bryson dismounts and walks among numerous freshly dismembered skeletons. Examining the remains that mark Brendel's recent path through the village, the precise cuts and angles reveal a master swordsman's work, prompting him to count the victims rather than blame random destruction. As the total steadily rises, Bryson and another soldier notice an especially important dark corpse lying farther among the wreckage. A black-robed corpse wizard lies severed on the stones near detached skulls and armor, confirming the unknown fighter killed more than foot soldiers. 7 undead fell together, including the caster. Since Bucci's militia lacks such skill, Bryson suspects a traveling knight passed through. He quickly remounts and orders the column onward, expecting that whoever created this battlefield may provide clear answers farther ahead. At that very moment, Brendel continues fighting in the inferno, his golden eyes fixed on enemies beyond the blazing rubble. He stands directly surrounded by fallen skeletons as another approaches from behind, moments before the advancing militia reaches this destruction. Reaching the ruined pasture district, Brendel repeatedly calls for Freya and desperately reminds himself that Eween's future restoration depends on her. Hoofbeats approach through the smoke, making him question whether Madara's opening attack has already advanced beyond its expendable skeleton forces. Instead, Bryson charges past on horseback and cuts down a corpse wizard, roaring his hatred for Madara while militia follow behind. The riders halt among the flames, and the supposed traveling master finally stands face to face with the vice captain who followed his trail. Bryson recognizes him as Brando and demands to know why he is inside occupied Green Village rather than safely elsewhere. Still focused on his missing companions, the young swordsman ignores the surprise and asks Bryson precisely the same question in return. The vice captain formally orders him to report immediately, but Brendel flatly refuses an argument and says he only wants Freya. Learning Freya is nearby deeply shocks Bryson, who cannot understand why she would enter this devastated settlement during the attack. Brendel explains their urgent resupply mission and lost contact, then resumes calling for her while fire consumes the surrounding buildings. Bryson lowers his gaze in troubled silence, his expression revealing that he carries news far worse than another undead patrol. He asks that Freya receive his regards and learn Aunt Seal and her uncle died in the afternoon battle, but Brendel silences him. A large sword suddenly strikes the stones nearby, abruptly revealing that the missing captain has already heard the devastating report. Freya stands openly crying and rejects the news as impossible, unable to accept that her aunt could truly have died. She collapses beside Aunt Seal's body and sobs while the surrounding militia soldiers remain still beneath the burning district's light. Watching her grief, Brendel concludes that, despite his interventions, history has returned to its original deeply tragic course after all. The moment offers no peace. Another corpse wizard orders fresh skeletons to kill everyone, sending armed undead charging into the mourners. Furious at their timing, Brendel advances with Thorn wrapped in blue light and promises these attackers chose the perfect moment to die. His first sweeping strike tears through the front line, throwing several skeletons backward before they can surround the grieving captain. Bryson joins from the opposite side, raising his sword overhead and charging another cluster with his mounted fury now fully justified. Freya rises through her tears and unleashes a blue crescent slash, demanding that Madara's monsters return Aunt Seal to her. After the clash, surviving militia rest together beneath the night sky, their blood-stained armor revealing how expensive this brief victory became. A soldier offers Ison genuine Clear Lake fire wine, arguing death comes eventually and he would rather fall than leave the bottle orphaned. Ison finally drinks, then worries about Freya and hopes Brando can somehow talk sense into their grieving captain before dawn. Away from the resting soldiers, Freya and Brendel watch Green Village burn from a hillside, sharing silence above the spreading smoke. Left alone by Bryson and even Ison, the veteran gamer realizes comforting devastated people remains harder than clearing any dungeon boss. Still crying, Freya finally asks why war must exist at all, placing a question before him that no sword can parry. He answers that wars will always happen in their terrible era. Yet accepting reality does not mean surrendering the power to change it. Even if they cannot transform everything, fighting beside others still matters because the struggle itself proves they genuinely tried together. Remembering comrades from his former life, he quietly dedicates his precious second chance to Eruen and everyone denied another attempt. Knowing her future, Brendel asks whether Freya has ever imagined becoming this land's guardian deity. Though she doubts herself completely, he insists that whatever awaits her, countless companions will stand beside her, ensuring she never has to carry destiny alone. His promise recalls the aunt, uncle, friends, and villagers who shaped Freya's life, keeping their presence alive within her grief. Freya wipes her tears and thanks Brando. Her first fragile smile showing his improvised comfort speech somehow landed a critical hit. They sit quietly together afterward, looking across the darkened hillside while shared sorrow gradually settles into something steadier than despair. Facing the burning village, both silently forge the same resolve. Protect everyone they can and prevent Eruen from repeating this tragedy. By morning, Bryson orders every ruin search for supplies because Captain Marden still waits, and the survivors must return prepared. Brendel shifts rubble with suspicious enthusiasm, delighted that the old Green Village strategy guide correctly remembered a hidden treasure cache. His search uncovers heaps of food and several chests of coins, leaving nearby soldiers wondering whether their helpful swordsman became a bandit. Brendel privately rejects that accusation because gamers, by sacred loot room tradition, are apparently much better at ransacking places than bandits. The real jackpot is the Wind Queen's cuirass, inferior to his ring and thorn, but still exceptional equipment for any beginner. He asks Freya to wear the cuirass, while Bryson immediately protests that such flashy junk cannot possibly belong in real combat. Freya finds the armor stiff and heavy, encouraging other soldiers to mock Brendel for treating obsolete equipment like priceless treasure. Unbothered by their criticism, he quietly speaks the armor's activation command, and pale blue magical light begins gathering around its wearer. Freya's blue eyes widen as the unexpected glow intensifies, instantly replacing her discomfort with genuine surprise before the assembled militia. The cuirass reshapes into elegant full armor that fits perfectly and feels lighter, leaving Freya convinced Brando just cast some mysterious spell. He explains that elven smiths forged this magical armor during the year of of radiant return, exposing every earlier complaint as pure ignorance. Now equipped properly, Freya leads the pack horses away from Green Village while Bryson and the loaded militia escort their recovered supplies. Hungry refugees celebrate when the column reaches camp with food, loudly thanking Marcia that Freya, Bryson, and their companions survived. Soldiers and civilians stream between the tents to welcome the returning horses, transforming the exhausted camp with sudden hopeful movement. Brendel notices the camp has many people but no scouts, concluding prolonged peace has dulled even November War veteran Marden's reactions. Captain Marden publicly praises Freya and Bryson for avenging their fallen comrades and bringing enough provisions to sustain the refugees. He declares Madara's rotten bones thoroughly unimpressive and promises renewed battle after everyone eats and drinks. Drawing a thunderous cheer, Brendel remains sober amid the celebration. Knowing Bucci's surviving guards still cannot match the regular Madara army waiting beyond them, surviving the invasion's next waves will require full military mobilization across Aween, not merely courage from one battered village militia. That night, hungry refugees stare into a bubbling stew and wonder whether the actual meat inside proves they are dreaming. Someone orders the stunned diners to stop talking and eat, and the camp finally shares its first satisfying meal together. While everyone celebrates around the fires, Romaine sits alone atop a boulder beneath the stars, with Brendel standing quietly below. He asks why she avoids the lively gathering, apparently finding her lonely perch considerably more concerning than the party itself. Romaine says the villagers dislike her because they consider both her and her aunt strange, making lonely solitude feel easier. Although his borrowed memories know Romaine well, Brendel cannot recall her aunt's appearance and asks what happened to her parents. Romaine has never met her parents. Her aunt raised her from earliest memory and expects repayment once the aspiring merchant grows up. Before he can investigate further, armored Freya suddenly arrives and reports Captain Marden wants him, an invitation surprising them both. Brendel assumes the captain has called a temporary combat council and probably plans some new military operation against the undead. Inside the command tent, Bryson furiously challenges his right to predict failure, apparently treating strategic criticism almost like personal treason. Captain Marden calmly restrains the dispute and asks the doubtful young swordsman to explain his opinion about their planned arrangements. Relieved that Marden is less explosive than his game counterpart, Brendel begins by asking how many undead armies invaded Bucci. Marden reports the original force received reinforcements, and different flags indicate at least 2 command bases despite their uncertain organization. Brendel says their conclusion is wrong because they misunderstand Madara, challenging the officers before explaining what those banners truly represent. Madara's lords have fought and plundered since the Age of Runes and Swords, producing veteran troops whose different banners represent unequal scales. Freya wonders whether Brendel genuinely possesses extraordinary intelligence or simply discovered that weaponizing a perfectly timed lore dump looks impressive. Bryson demands proof that he could know Madara's internal situation, but Brendel refuses another argument and instead asks the time. Marden ends the interruption and orders Bryson to describe every enemy encountered, giving their unexpected advisor the evidence he requested. 5 minutes later, Brendel identifies their persistent pursuer as Necromancer Roscoe, currently a squadron leader commanding more than 20 liches. He identifies Qing Village's destroyer as Skeleton General Kabais, whose forces include ordinary skeleton soldiers, black warriors, and pale knights. Revealing such dangerously precise intelligence directly would make the officers mistake him for Madara's spy and probably execute him immediately. He instead explains Madara's 3 great factions: vampires, necromancers, and dark lords, with an ancient prophecy promising resurrection if they unite. Bryson calls that a fine story, but Brendel says unity is happening now and asks about the legendary Quicksilver Staff. Marden recognizes old tales claiming whoever obtains that mysterious staff can finally unite the entire dark world beneath one command, named the Quicksilver Staff of Loki. It belonged to a genius necromancer who nearly united Madara. Recent merchants reported its carrier opening a gate. Brendel identifies that passage as the Gate of Sighs, proving Loki's treasure unified this operation beneath necromancers and dark lords. Marden asks whether Bryson considers the young man's analysis credible, and the reluctant vice captain admits it cannot be far wrong. Gripping his sword, the old captain says he dislikes complicated explanations, making Brendel wonder whether this consultation just became an execution. Marden only wants a route that lets everyone break through together. Under that murderous pressure, Brendel proposes heading north across Dagger River Beach. The officers question why that dangerous beach should become their escape route, forcing their advisor to justify the surprising destination. He cannot reveal that White Knight Eberton and Ghoul Weedom historically arrived there 2 days later, so another explanation is necessary. Brendel asks Bryson about Qing Village's broken demonic statue, which the vice captain clearly remembers as incredibly heavy but seemingly irrelevant. The object controls a Buga-made war gargoyle that he secretly used for reconnaissance until it unexpectedly crashed near Qing Village. Freya finally understands why he entered the occupied village despite severe injuries, and her timely deduction supports his reconnaissance claim. Marden orders Buki's guards to cover a pre-dawn breakthrough against Madara, while Bryson escorts every remaining villager through Dagger River Beach. He reminds the soldiers that protecting others even through death is a warrior's destiny, and the entire formation accepts their duty. Martin then commands Brendel to join the militia, but he objects that nobody has warned Riedenberg about Madara's possible defensive flanking maneuver. With manpower exhausted, the captain asks for another solution. Brendel offers a slim, independent route to Riedenberg that beats doing nothing. That alternative is Xavier Mountain Pass, a name delivered with enough calm confidence to conceal every monster-sized complication awaiting there. Martin rejects the dead end and refuses to waste his soldiers against its rumored giant dragon, so Brendel volunteers to go alone. The captain praises his courage and permits one attendant, while Brendel insists necessity, not theatrical bravery, drives his dangerous choice. Urgent preparations continue beside the blazing campfire as the survivors approach the final tense hours before their divided escape operation. Romaine happily thanks him for remembering her, but he orders 3 days of food and water packed for their journey. While organizing supplies, he discovers an ornate blue and gold card attached to a bottle and pauses over the completely unfamiliar object. Its face shows an armored swordsman, 6 red diamonds, and the number 2, yet even his extensive game knowledge cannot identify it. Brendel calls Romaine over to examine the card, only for the aspiring merchant to protest his habit of calling her little. Romaine briefly suspects tarot, then admits she would recognize one. With neither understanding it, Brendel stores the mystery card safely. A sudden sound makes him silence Romaine, whose confusion rises as his attention shifts from the strange card toward the forest. They spot Bryson moving horses and numerous soldiers secretly through the trees, strangely beginning something before the agreed dawn operation. One soldier questions opposing November War veteran Martin, but Bryson insists that very reason demands action, and several comrades support him. Brendel steps into their path, saying he expected sneaking undead rather than Bryson leading a large armed group before dawn. Their swords violently collide as Brendel asks whether this is mutiny, while Bryson furiously condemns his infuriating certainty about everything.